Hi, friends, and welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Trunnis, welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I've been so looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I would love to just start a little more informally and have you tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, and how you have kind of landed in the work that you're doing now.
Well, I am, again, my name is Trunnis Goggins. I don't know why you always start with that saying your name, but anyway, I am a educator. I've been in education now for higher education now for about 16 years. I was in the Navy before that. I have a very large family. Most of my kids now are very much on their own and creating families of their own. I have at one point I did have 9 children. I had 5 sons and 4 daughters. One of my daughters passed away, but now I have 3 grandsons as well. I am raising the grandson that was with that my daughter passed, was my daughter's. And then I have 2 other grandsons with my oldest living daughter, and they live in Indiana. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm going to have to say I'm a carpetbagger. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I love Buffalo. I'm a big Bills fan, big Sabres fan, so I'm a miserable person most of the time. But yeah, very miserable person most of the time. But I do love sports. It is my outlet. And I also do education consulting, and I do small business consulting as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
And you also, you have a message that you love to share with the world that we're going to dig into a little bit today. But I know that in the work that you do, communication and collaboration are 2 of the things that you spend a lot of time talking about. Why, how, what do we all need to know about those things? Because they're words obviously that we've all heard and that we know are important, but we're not very good at them sometimes. And they're particularly important in families. So help us unpack that a little bit.
Communication and collaboration are 2 things. And it's funny, I'm going to go back to when I was working on my PhD. I was working on my PhD. I did my PhD on strategic planning. And I interviewed, and it was for nonprofit organizations, right? So I'm sitting there talking to these nonprofit organizations, and they're trying to put together strategic plans. This is something very much for-profit oriented. So these guys are going and they have no idea what they're doing. So I write this, I'm trying to fill in these gaps. And the one thing that I found out is everybody was going through the motions. All right. They were doing the meetings, they were doing all these other things. But then after they were done, one person would do their part, the other person would do their part, then they'd put it all together, they'd have one report, they were done, and they would never, ever talk about it again.
Ah,
They would never talk about it. They would never explain it. And so what I found was that companies, and I'm starting, I know I'm taking a long approach, but companies that don't communicate what they're really trying to do, their strategic plan eventually falters, sometimes even fails. And I also see that in families with communication. Okay, you have got mom and dad. I know as a dad, because I watched my dad growing up, right? My dad he went to work, he did his thing, and then my mom worked and she did her thing. And then at the end, wait till I was from the 80s, so wait till your dad gets home, 70s and 80s. Okay. So
yeah.
you knew that mom was the I should say, I don't want to say mom was the tattletale because that's not the case, but mom was the messenger, okay? And then dad was the enforcer, right?
Yeah.
So wait till your dad gets home, we're in trouble. And so when we get to this point now, it's now the family dynamic's totally different. Okay. There's no longer the messenger and the enforcer, usually now. So in most cases, it's sometimes the other way around. But the other thing going on is that a lot of the family dynamic has changed where there are so many families that are, it's co-parenting now. And the reason why there is co-parenting is because mom or dad may not live together.
Mhm.
Okay. And so as a result, the communication breaks down, or the communication is malicious.
Mhm.
All right. I grew up in a family that was separated, and they were, my mom and dad separated when I was 12 years old. And I remember that my mom and dad never spoke. And as a result, for them not speaking, I mean, as a kid, you're going to manipulate that. And
Yeah.
as a result of manipulating that, I fortunately did not get in too much trouble, as a teenager and whatever. I did manipulate the process. I'll never forget, my dad was a smoker. And so when I was at my dad's house, I would, take his cigarettes as a kid, and smoke them, right? And so when I got 16, and it's funny, it was weird because when I was 16 years old, it was legal for me to smoke cigarettes. It was legal for me to go to the store and buy cigarettes. When I was 17 years old, it was illegal. And then when I was 18, it was legal again,
Oh, interesting. Just 'cause
because
of the way
the
the law
law the
changed.
law changed right when I was within the law at 16, but I quit smoking, thank God. But anyway, and I remember when I smoked, I was 16 years old, and it was a communication breakdown. My mom did not want me smoking, and her boyfriend found a pack of cigarettes in my jacket. So he was very, very um, visual, and he took the cigarettes and threw them away. And I said, I'm just going to buy another pack here in a minute because my dad says I can smoke. So when you don't communicate, or when or the communication's malicious, it can lead to some serious issues within the family dynamic. And the funny thing is who it hurts the most is the child eventually. Mhm.
Yeah, well, and it strikes me, I mean, obviously there are many, many families that are dealing with the co-parenting situation that you describe. There are also many families who are theoretically not co-parenting. They're parenting from the same house, right? Mom
Mhm.
and dad, or mom and mom, dad and dad live in the same home, but they're still not communicating, right? The
Yeah.
communication
Mhm.
is still not happening. And I mean, I laugh a little bit about the story that you tell. I also am a child of the 70s and the 80s. I certainly remember times when I was a kid where I would know that my parents had not communicated with one another about something. And I would ask one parent and get a no. And then I'd be like, well, I don't really like that answer very much. So I'm going to go ask the other parent and see if I can get a yes. And most parents listening to this can probably relate. My kids have tried the same thing, right? They will ask
Mhm.
me, and I'm usually the one that says no. And then they go ask their dad, and he's much more likely to give a yes. And I say that with all the love in my heart for my husband. But, they know, like, if they don't get the answer they like from one, they will have in the past tried the other one. My teenager seems to know better than that at this point. My 6-year old still trying it
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when we've got these situations, whether it's in a co-parenting situation or, within a nuclear family that's, still living in the same home, well, actually, maybe the answer to these are different, but how do we start to boost communication? And that may be easier if we have a fellow parent who's on board with boosting it than if we have someone who's not. But what sort of tools do you talk about, or ways do you encourage families to try to improve the way that they're talking with each other so the kids aren't suffering?
One thing that all parents want is they want to make sure that their kids are successful. Okay, they want to make sure their kids are ready to go on and take on this world. Okay, however they need to do that. I think that is something that is the common ground between mom and dad, right? So if they find, and again, it's almost like once you find, okay, we both agree that we want to make sure that our child is successful and can function in the real world and all that other stuff. At that point, you build on that. What does successful look like? Okay. a lot of times we come from, like me, I came from a family. My dad was a nightclub owner, and my mom was an educator. My mom and dad separated. I lived with my dad. My dad was a nightclub owner. I'm going to tell you right now, wow, if I raised my kids like I would never. I thought it was cool the way I was being raised, but I would never allow that. My dad's like, hey, I'm going to be home at 4 o'clock in the morning. And this is when I was a teenager. I'll be home at 4 o'clock in the morning. All shenanigans have to stop by 3:30 because I'll be home and I don't want to have any nonsense going on in my house. That's
Mm,
exactly how it was, right? Now, me,
yeah.
my dad was like, I grew up in the Buffalo Niagara region, so we would always cross the border. The drinking age in the United States obviously was 21 at that time. The drinking age in Canada was 19. So at 17, you could probably pass without get shown an ID and doing what you have to do. And so the thing is that it was a totally different ball game. Okay, when I was being raised, but if my parents would have sat down and said, what does it look like? What does success look like for our child? They could start building on that. And then what happens is they say, okay, now since we have what success looks like and we've agreed and we have a similar picture, now we can sit there and put together, okay, what do we say? What do we do? How do we handle certain situations that are going to come up? Okay.
Mhm.
And if that, I have a book coming out called The Four P's of You. Once you establish your purpose, once you establish your mission, you could start building on that. Okay. And that's exactly what I want, what you should, not what I want, but what you should want for your kid. All right. What's our purpose? Our purpose is to get our kid grounded and ready to go out there and take on the world on their own independently with very little help from us when they turn 21.
Yeah.
Okay, that's our purpose. So now how do we plan for that? How do we work together? And part of that is communication. Part of that is now you have sort of like a constitution, so to speak. You have a guideline, you have a set of rules. So, and if you guys both agree upon what success looks like or what the purpose looks like, then you can go on and you could talk about this. Hey, I have and another thing about parents is, don't try to be the cool parent. And I've seen this in relationships where you have one parent, especially when it's a co-parenting situation, that wants to be the cool one. They're going to come to me and they're going to hang out with me and they're going to, because then they'll talk to me and trust me more and whatever. And that's not always the case. What you need to have is you need to be, both of you need to be the good parent. And that means that if you go in, swallow your ego, swallow the pride, all that other stuff, and absolutely work together to make sure that that kid's successful, because that's ultimately the number one goal.
Yeah. I love the way that you said, don't try to be the cool parent. We both need to be the good parent.
Mhm.
And those two things are often not synonymous with one another, right? They're
Exactly.
often different. So you mentioned in the course of answering that question, you mentioned the book that you have coming out, and
Mhm.
that there's these four P's. And you know, given what you said, I gather that the first P is purpose, which
Right.
resonates so strongly with me because, like, with my coaching clients, we often talk about what is the end goal here. We have to parent with the end in mind. What are the other P's, and how do those sort of play into how we can show up as the good parent, not just the cool parent?
So it's purpose, planning, passion, and persistence. With parenting, the funny thing is the passion is already there. Okay, so in my book I talk about, careers and school and all these, and starting a business, and you have to have a passion for it. If it's a parent, you're always going to have that passion. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. All
Yeah.
right, but what I am going to talk about is the purpose, and then I'm going to talk about the planning, and then I'm going to talk about the persistence. And I am going to tell you a little bit about my story. I know I told you about my daughter who passed away. All right,
Hmm.
when my children, my number one purpose was to be the best father I can be. All right, always be there, always provide, always do what I had to do. And then it came the planning. it's not just, and this is a harsh thing. You can love your parent, your kids, but you can also, you can love them to death, but you don't want to love them to death. Okay, that is a bad thing. All right. You have to plan. So, what does that mean? You have to make sure that love means that you are providing. Love means that you are putting them in a situation and you're putting them in a circumstance where they are going to be able to be successful as they can be. So, that takes a lot of work from you. It takes a lot of planning. What does that mean? That means that being the parent, you're going to have to stop doing things that you used to do before you had kids. Bottom line. All right, you're
Mhm.
going to have to stop doing it. And I see this all the time. I see parents who go out and they're not planning. They're like, well, all I got to do is feed you and make sure that you go to school on time. That is not a good parent. That is not a good plan, because what you're doing is you are leaving your children to your own devices. So you absolutely, once you have that purpose, I want to be a good parent, the next thing is you have to plan. And what does a good parent do? And then you have to, and sometimes you don't have, there are a lot of parents out there, unfortunately, who do not have a model to go by. So now and so it's okay to go talk to people. It's okay to plan with others to try to get that piece in place. And then, like I said, I'm going to leave passion out of it, because you should love your kids. That's the natural thing to do. But the other thing is persistence. Your kids and your plan is, it's always, you're dealing with outside variables. You're dealing with the kid's attitude. You're dealing with, and sometimes the kid's attitude is your attitude when you're a kid, and you're like, oh my god, you could call your parent right off the way. I am so sorry I did that to you, please forgive me. But you're dealing with that. And sometimes you're in persistence, sometimes things don't go as purpose. My daughter, she passed away, and she was shot and killed breaking up a fight in Indianapolis, Indiana. And there's a couple things. As a father, I got a call. It was about 11:15 that night. I was sleeping. It
Mm.
was a Friday night, and I was actually sleeping. I got called. I mean, the phone rang. I always sleep with the TV on, and for some reason, I don't remember the episode, thank God. But Family Guy was watching me, right? And I look up, I see Family Guy, and I get the call, and I hear, and the phone was, hey, Kayla was shot. I didn't know she was dead. I thought that maybe, she got shot. She's going to go to the hospital. I remember going to the crime scene. And the funny thing is, I said, where is it? Where did this happen? And they gave me a general direction. And I got there in 5 seconds. I didn't know exactly the street. I didn't know anything. I just knew the direction I had to go. I got there. And when I got there, um, I saw a cop. There was a whole bunch of people there. And when I got there, I said, hey, I know my daughter got shot. What hospital did they go to? That's what I said. And I remember that cop looking at me and he said that, he said, no one went to the hospital.
Mm.
So you don't have to tell me anything else.
Yeah.
I know somebody got shot. Um, I saw an ambulance leave. And she didn't make it. She didn't make it. And unfortunately, I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to do anything. My passion or my purpose at that point, I felt that I had failed.
Mm.
I felt like I had failed. Um, and I felt that my purpose was to be the best father to protect. And fathers love their daughters, and I loved her dearly. I had so many. I put together a plan, so to speak, to make sure she had everything, and then it right there gone. Okay, and I had other children, and now my purpose is to. Okay, so my purpose is still to be a good father, but then I had to do it with persistence. There was a great deal of pain. Do you know that night, worse than I didn't, and it was worse. It was worse for me to tell my kids that their sister had died than for me to identify her body.
Yeah.
And that's how bad it was that night. I remember identifying her body, They said, "Hey, do you need a ride home?" I said, "No, I don't need a ride home. I just need to go." I got in my car, I drove home, and when I drove home, I went, and there's a great deal of pain. And I know that this pain of losing a child and then having to tell other children what's going on and try to keep them together, because now, there's a new plan that has to be made. But we have to, as parents, be persistent, and that's probably the even more important than the purpose and everything. It's the persistence. What we do, I mean, everybody holds their kid for the first time. They look at him and they're like, "Oh, this is going to be wonderful," and all that other stuff. And then the real things come. Oh my God, I can't wait. And this is funny, I can't wait till my child gets out of the toddler years, because then I can sleep through the night. Yes, you sleep through the night from the time he's 3 to the time he's 14. Okay. At 14, you are not sleeping through the night anymore. Okay. You're not. Matter of fact, you are having worse sleep when they are teenagers than you did when they were toddlers.
Isn't that the truth? Yep.
And I want to tell people that all the time, but then I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, right? But it's true. You are now worried. My kids now are they're in their 20s. They're all old, like older, and they're going through their own adult things, and I lose sleep over them still.
Yep.
I don't have to pay their rent or anything like that, but I'm kind of like, wow, because I know that they're going through the real hard things in life, and you have to be, again, that's where the persistence comes, because that's when you have to stay strong, and you are going through pain.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, Trunnis, there's so many things I want to say and so many places that we can go with that story. And I've, read a bit about your story, but to hear it, from your mouth and to kind of put myself as I mean, I can't really, but to try to put myself in those shoes of learning that your daughter had not only died, which, obviously many parents unfortunately deal with that, but
Yeah.
then to
Mhm.
learn that she had died as a result of violence. And I know, as you mentioned earlier, she was a mama.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, the pain of that, and as you said, then the really enhanced pain of telling your children, uh, saying I'm so sorry that that happened feels so inadequate. Um, and and yet, as I hear you tell the story, I'm drawn in by this idea of through all of that, like you still had, I think, 8 other children. You have 9, you
I
had
did.
9, right?
Yeah.
So 8 other children to parent through that experience. And that idea that persistence is what really came into play as you worked through and probably for the rest of your life will continue to
Yeah.
work through that.
One thing that I realized, so with my kids, they're I go back and I think about, teenage years, what disappointed me. Okay. I used to, play sports and things like that. And if I lost a championship, that would disappoint me. The last I went, and my two younger sons, they play hockey. And so right after my kids, after all this went down, I decided, we're going to coach one year, the three of us, we're all going to be together on a team, and maybe this will help, in our therapy, and get some family togetherness. And so it's funny, the league that I coach for, they were very, they were hometown boys, and we were from out of town. And so what they did was, I'm from Buffalo, and another guy that I coach with is from Pittsburgh. So they put us together, because we're not hometown boys. We're not from Indiana. So they're going to put us on our own team. And then the thing is they drafted our team, and they put together a team of ragtag misfits, right? We got to keep our kids on the team, but everybody else was like, we didn't want the guys to be. So they gave us a bad news Bears team.
Okay.
Okay. They
Uh-huh.
really did. And it was a funny story, because again, like I said, I'm from Buffalo, he's from Pittsburgh, so we're a bunch of blue collar guys, and we said, okay, we're going to play within a system that they can work, and we ended up going 22-1.
Wow.
Okay, with these kids, and these kids actually got them to believe in themselves. Like I said, it was, but the one game we lost, so we won the championship, we won the league championship, but then there was an all city championship. Okay, the last game of the season, that's the one we lost.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I remember going to the locker room, and I remember watching all these kids. They were crying, they were so upset that they lost. Then I remember watching my two sons. They were probably 8 months removed from losing their sister,
Hmm.
and they were like, who cares?
Yeah, just the game.
um it's just a game, and there's so many other things that you can lose. So when I talk about persistence, I talk about persistence as parents, but I also, one thing that you have to realize is when children suffer a loss, and it could be divorce, it could be anything, but when they suffer a loss, um, the way they handle life, like at their level, changes.
Hmm.
And I don't, it makes them, as a parent, what you have to do is you have to, you know, they, they talk about when you injure a leg, or you break something, they say your range of motion has been affected. When you get physically injured, or I'm sorry, mentally injured or emotionally injured, your range of emotion is affected.
Mm,
And you have to watch that range. You have to be careful, because like your range of motion, there's certain things that you can't do anymore. There's certain things you can't move. But when your range of emotion is changed, you really, as a parent, you have to watch that. Counseling is important. Communication, we went right back to that word. Communication is absolutely important. Um, if they see mom and dad like pushing forward and being strong, they don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And so they would, if they don't understand the full scope of how mom and dad are moving on, they may feel guilty or ashamed if they're feeling a certain way about, oh my God, I miss my sister or whoever at that point.
yeah.
So you have to be careful of that.
I mean, that idea that when you hurt a body part, you lose a range of motion. When you are hurt emotionally, or mentally, you lose that range of emotion. I'm so curious, as I mean, it strikes me that there are a few things that happen in our lives that are as emotional and difficult as losing a child or losing a sibling. Um, and culturally speaking, we're not great at emotion. We're not great at talking about it. We're not great at acknowledging it, validating it, or even many of us are not great at knowing how to feel our feelings. I'm curious, as you parented through that, because like you said, it'd be sort of tempting maybe for parents to say, I'm strong, I can do this, I got this. um and that may not be serving the other people in our sphere, our children, our other extended family members. How did you create open space for the emotions that were coming up, which was probably a pretty wide range given that you
Yeah.
had 8 kids? um how did you go about creating that space for them and modeling that emotions were okay?
Well, they saw their dad, and again, I'm a Navy guy. I'm pretty, I don't, I don't cry, whatever. They saw me cry. They saw me break down, and I said, it's okay. You know, it's okay to cry. It's okay to hurt. This is a very painful moment. And another thing I told them is that you're probably never going to get over this. There's nothing that but you're going to have to get through it. So if you need to talk to a counselor, if you can't talk to me, if you need to take, some time away or whatever you need to do, you need to do that. But that's how I kind of created that space. In other words, it's okay. This does hurt, and it's not okay. And they did quite well with it. The other thing that happened with my kids are pretty much half siblings. I'm a Navy guy. I don't mean to sound, but even I kept them together as much as I could. And they we all lived in the same city. We all spent a lot of time together. All of us did. But when I moved away, my kids were older, and I said it's time for me to go, because I didn't really want to stay in Indiana anymore. So I left Indiana, and when it was time for me to go, and I see them all the time, but my kids, every single week, they make sure they spend time together. They're all adults.
Mm.
They are extremely close. Last summer, my son, and this is my fault, he's a Blue Jays fan. Okay. And so it's totally my fault.
Like the most
Um,
disappointing thing about him, right, is that he's
yeah,
not the
yeah.
fan of the same team you are.
No, no, actually, I'm
Or-
I'm a Blue Jays fan as
oh,
well. But I
okay,
said it's my
okay.
fault because again, I suffer with my team, so I allowed other kids to suffer as
I
well.
gotcha.
But what he did last year is he bought all of his siblings tickets, because it's since they were in Cincinnati, the Blue Jays were. He bought all of his siblings tickets for a kids' day, or a siblings' day at the Blue Jays game. He spent a lot of money, of his own money. And I watched this, and here I am looking at my kids, and I'm looking at the togetherness that they have. They share a common bond. And I'm so proud of that they love each other. And if something happens to me, or when something happens to me, that togetherness will move on. So,
Yeah.
and that's one thing I'm very happy about.
And it sounds like, to sort of circle back again, like you created that with collaboration, with
Mhm.
communication, and then a focus on, the purpose, passion, planning, and persistence needed
Mhm.
to parent well, even through true trauma.
Yeah.
For those parents who are listening to this, and I mean, I can't imagine anyone listening isn't touched by that story. But for those parents who are saying, okay, um, fortunately, my children are living, and they're here. But there's nuggets to be learned here. I'd like to think about how to implement sort of the four P's maybe more profoundly in my own parenting. What are some steps that you would suggest? Or, even for someone who's saying, great, I've got the four P's down in my parenting world, but my career over here, not so much. So, when you are introducing the idea of the four P's in your book or in talks that you give, where do you suggest that people start?
Well, always with purpose, and make sure that purpose is your purpose. You're not don't and we live in a society, with social media and all these other things, that we always try to strive to live someone else's purpose. What am I supposed to look like? What am I supposed to wear? What am I supposed to, how am I supposed to sound? What sports team am I supposed to watch? And it's because everybody else, like, it becomes a fad, it becomes a trend. Don't don't trend. Take care of yourself. What's your purpose? Okay. Just because the family next door does XYZ with their kids, if that's not going to work in your family, don't do it, because you're going to have to find something that works for you. So that's what I mean by purpose. You always want to make sure, what do you want your kid to look like? Okay. Don't, and we do this all the time. Well, Jimmy over there, he's a quarterback for the high school football team. Why aren't you? Well, because I don't want to play football. Okay, that's why. All right, and that's fine. You could have a kid that is two steps away, because they're upstairs working on a chemistry set or whatever they're working on. They're two steps away of finding the cure for cancer. I'm sorry, high school football quarterback or the guy who comes with the cure of cancer? Who's more important? I think the guy finding the cure for cancer is more important. Always try and make sure that you make your kids feel that what they are doing is important.
Mm.
All right. And if it's not important or if it could be dangerous, make sure you are a parent enough to tell them, hey, you don't want to go down that road. All right. But make them feel, because what you are doing, your purpose is to make you, again, the purpose of a parent is to make sure that their kids are ready to go and ready to take on this world. Okay. Which is very difficult. If you build that confidence, that true confidence, I'm not saying that false confidence, like, oh my gosh, look at my kid. I'm not talking about giving everybody a trophy, but what I am talking about is build the passion in that kid, make that kid walk out and do, and take on the world. My grandson, he lives with me now here in North Carolina. It was my daughter's son. He's 9 years old now. Very proud of him. Now at 53 years old, I'm sure I'm the oldest person going. I really don't. When I go pick up my kid from school and I'm like literally old enough to be like the parents, I'm like,
Oh,
dude,
Trunnis,
come
I'm
on.
50 and I got a 6-year-old, so I'm right there with you.
All right, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
All right, so there
Yeah.
you go. But anyway, with my grandson, he loves art. He loves things. Now, I'm a sports guy. He does not play sports, right? I'm not pushing him to like play sports. I'm like, you know what? You're a great artist. He does something that I can't do. I can't draw anything. Okay, I can't even draw a card. But he is so good at what he does, and I want to give him that confidence. And then I tell him, hey, these are the routes that you could take with your talent. And those are the things. So that's how, your purpose is to, and do whatever it takes to make sure that your kids are ready to take on this world. And then again, I can't stress enough the persistence. No, as parents, and I want the audience to know, you are going to go through hard times. You're probably going through hard times right now. And they start in the very beginning. I remember that I had one of my sons, I was changing his diaper, and my dad was sitting with me, and I was changing the diaper, and my son literally peed in my face. And I was like, gosh, I can't believe this. You know what my father said? He goes, that is not the worst thing that's going to happen to you with that kid.
Thanks, Dad.
But he's right. I was like, but and that's one thing that you have to realize. But you still have to love your child, either way, and you have to guide them. And they're going to hurt your heart. They're going to break your heart. They're going to break their own heart, which is going to break your heart. And you just have to be there for them. And like I said, that persistence. That it's not always going to be a Brady Bunch episode when it is raising your kids. So.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Trunnis. Well, you've certainly shown us how you brought the persistence and the purpose to the terrible experience and the losing your daughter, and the way that you sort of modeled those 4 Ps, it sounds like, for all of your children and your grandchildren. And hey, I gotta say, there's nothing wrong with raising kids at an older age. I think
no
brings wisdom, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, Trunnis, in the interest of time, we have to wrap up today, but what is the best place for people to find you and the work that you are doing in the world?
You can reach me on TrunnisGoggins2.com. It is a website. You can get my book from there. If you need to schedule any type of, like I said, I have consulting. I have speaking engagements. If you want to book one, you can do it right from that site. And they're also adding some other content to the site as well as we speak.
Perfect. Well, we will make sure that the link for that and all the places to track you down are in the show notes. And Trunnis, I'm just grateful for you sharing your insights, your wisdom, and your story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.